But in this session, we're going to talk about two main components of Creator, reports, and pages. So I've got a couple slides that we'll go over some fluff content, and then we'll jump into a demo, and we'll start making some customizations. I'll show you some ways to make reports, and I'll show you some new features we got and how those work and enhance the report building capabilities. So this is just a fancy little picture that shows the information that we put into the system. The middle triangle is going to be Creator and the reports and pages that we can build. And obviously you can see a little bit more. So it lets you break that light spectrum up to be able to see what exactly you need to see through different report and page components. The database itself is the Creator application. And the purpose of any database, whether in the Creator world or the development world or anywhere, is there's three main purposes of it. Collecting information, which you already talked about in the form section, being clearly organized, which we also talked about, and picking the right fields and selecting the right layouts for your form itself. And then the third one is going to be rapid retrieval, so being able to pick out information that we want to see very quickly. So we'll talk about all three of those. So forms, like I said, collecting information. We've got being able to have information easily organized, which is through our basic list reports, which this is a list report. A list report is just a listing of items, and it can be in a graphical interface like this, or it could literally just be in rows like you see in a spreadsheet, or the default view we give you. But it's an easy way to pick out information and organize it based on groupings, based on sort orders and stuff like that. The next one is going to be rapid retrieval, and that happens through different visual elements. And so here you can see I've got a bunch of information about cars. And if I'm having a database of cars where I'm storing, let's say, an inventory of cars or doing repairs on cars, it would be easy to know what kind of car it was just by looking at the color and the picture of the car itself, rather than seeing a row of text that said, red Mustang 2004 with this license plate. Seeing the picture makes it a lot easier to retrieve that information quickly, hence rapid retrieval. The next part about reports, which is pretty important, is knowing the right types of reports to make. One of the biggest problems people have in the Creator world is they don't make the right reports, as bad as that sounds. A lot of times the people who think they made the right reports are the ones who made the worst ones. So there's no shame in that. It's just knowing what is it you want to get out of this report. It's not just displaying information, but the information has to have some kind of a purpose, and it has to actually display something where you look at it and say, oh, that's kind of interesting. Now I know this about what's going on in this process. And so to explain on that a little bit more, I've got a bunch of different types of metrics here, and this is all for maybe a sales application. And in a sales application, you're generally probably tracking revenue and how much money we're making. But there's different types of objectives based on different team members that are going to be accessing this application. So on the far right-hand side in the blue, we have activity-based metrics. So this might be what a team lead is doing and managing and making sure all of their sales reps are making their calls properly, nothing is being done overdue, events are being attended, and tasks are being completed. Very, micromanaged and transactional. Then you might have something that a sales manager might be interested in, or a marketing manager, and that would be things like lead conversion percentages, what our pipeline is looking like, and how long our sales duration is. And then our business results, which might be from management, would be overall revenue, profits, and forecasts and trends. So all of this is basic sales information, but depending on the role of the user who's accessing it, they're going to want to see different types of reports. And so we need to have different types of reports created, and we also need to share them with the right types of people. But just making the reports for the person that needs to consume them, and making sure that they're getting the information that they need. Reports, three main ways to look at them: visualizing information, making changes to information that exists in the system, and then, quote, analyzing it or having it displayed in some chart format. I talked about the car example already. Here's a normal list report that you would kind of see in a spreadsheet. The next one is going to be where we see cars and the pictures of them, rather than seeing the make, model, and year, because who really cares about that? You really care about the image of the car itself. So that makes it look better, and here you can make it look this way. It doesn't really matter. And you want to see something cool? But anyways, it's just a lot of different ways to organize this information. So we've got a couple of predefined layouts that you can use, and we can make our own. So I'll walk through that here once we get into the product. And some more just graphics, right? So the next part is modification. And this is important because once you have data in the system, manipulating it is super important. You either want to update information about it or information about a record, maybe make bulk changes, find things. All those are different actions that you want to do. So the first thing we have is visualizing information properly. So here I've got a little calendar that shows how long a car is going to be in the service shop here, right? So if somebody's coming in for an oil change, it might take, I guess, 1 day. If they're coming in for body work, it might take 7 days. And you see I've got a little view here. So if I only have let's say 3 garages in my shop, I need to make sure that there's no more than 3 bars on the same day in that car or in that shop to make sure I have space for all of them, right? So it's an easy way to visualize it. And here, what you can actually do if you're using the calendar report is I can drag one of these bars and move it around. So I can kind of just highlight it and select it. Just like I would in a calendar app on your Mac or Outlook or whatever, you just pick up a bar, move it around, and it reschedules and resets those dates in that record. The next thing is going to be a Kanban report. So here, what I have is assigned mechanic, and that's the mechanic in charge of this repair. And if I simply drag it from Benjamin to Billy, it's going to assign a car from Benjamin to Billy. So instead of clicking on a record, scrolling down to the assigned mechanic field, clicking on the drop down, selecting their name, not knowing how many cars Billy has to work on or not, here you have a single interface where you can see Billy's workload, and you can apply filters to this report as well, which I'll talk about here in a bit. But you can see how many cars Billy has to work on, and if it's even worth giving it to Billy in this example or not, to average out the workload. Technically, Daniel over here is a slacker because he only has one car he's working on, so I'd give it to him, but you get the drift. Analysis. We have pivot charts and pivot tables in Creator, so you can make different reports based on different data that you are storing in the system, and then you can drill down into them too. So this is a very simple chart that shows how many repairs we did this year, and if I click into a section, it'll show me what types of cars I'm working on, and even on hover, when I hover over the Audi segment, I can drill down into different car models as well and look at that differently. So it's an interactive report and not static just based on the high level original chart. You can interact with them, and it's meant to be interacted with because that's really going to be where you drive your insights. The product itself can only give you so much information. Some of it you do have to discover on your own and find out where are the certain anomalies and stuff like that. So we'll hop over to our little demo account here, and I'm going to show you a couple of things about reports. So I'm going to dig into these records a little bit more, and one thing I haven't covered is when I click into a record on this Kanban report, I'll obviously see all the fields that are available inside. And so, actually, let's go to an ugly report. This is what most people are used to, right? You make a creator form, you probably have a report like this. So what happens here is I can click on a record, and again, I see the same layout on the right-hand side. So there's 2 things that we have here. We have what's called a quick view and a detail view. As you can imagine, when you click on a record, this is the details of that record, so hence the name detail view. And then when I'm looking at a bunch of stuff, it's a quick view because I'm quickly viewing a lot of things. So we can make some tweaks to this, which is super important and what somebody should always do or on any report. So I'm going to go back into the editor over here, and I'm going to show you on the right-hand side, we've got 2 columns, quick view, detail view. So first thing we'll go into quick view layouts. So there's a couple different layout options. By default, it's this row, which is what we all expect. And then we can bump into the card layout. So if I click on the card over here, I have the ability to, customize this card however I want it to look. And, different card layouts for different styles. One important thing here is going to be the actions. So when I'm on here, or when I'm looking at my list report, there's a couple different ways I can interact with the record. The first is clicking on a record itself. What happens when I click on that record? When I click on that record, maybe you don't want anything to happen. Maybe you want to open up the detail views. Maybe you want to run some function. Maybe we want to copy that record. Maybe we want to update the status of that record. Maybe we want to open up a pop-up. Whatever you really want to do, based on clicking on that record, we can have a different action happen. Also, when I right-click on a record, there's a couple options that we see here. We see view record, print, select this record, and select all records. Maybe I want to not allow somebody to print records. I want to turn that off. Or maybe I don't want them to even view records in this detail view because they don't have the right permissions for it. Similarly, when I select multiple records over here, you can see that the only option that appears on the left-hand side is this print option. So print is the only thing we have enabled here. All right, we're going to play with this NBA app instead. If I look at my actions, I have a bunch of different action configurations that are set here. If I come over here, on the click of a record right now, it's viewing it. So I'm going to change it to edit, and I'm going to come over here and do a refresh. And so now when I click on a record, it's going to take me directly to the edit page, which is not normal. Normally it'll show you the details page that's available on the right, right? So you can change what happens when you click on it. Same way, if you believe me, for a single record, when I select a record, I can change the options. And if I want to, right-click a record, I can see different options. There is no permission to prevent somebody from deleting stuff out of your application. So you give people access to view things, you give people access to edit things, but you cannot remove delete access. And so deleting this button will get rid of it. They don't delete things on accident. You don't have this mistake anymore. If you really want to make a change, you can delete the delete button. And what we can even do is on this plus icon on the far right, we can create what's called a custom action. And a custom action can archive a record instead. So now instead of having that record go into the trash that there's no recycling bin or anything, you can click on or you can make an archive button instead. That archive button can trigger a script. And what that script can do is it can save the contents of that record, push it off to some other database or somewhere else, and then remove it from what you see here. So it's an easy way to make sure that things get kind of taken out of the way, but nobody deletes anything that's sensitive. So running through these, last thing I'm going to show you on reports. So I showed you a couple of the layouts earlier, like we saw here on this NBA teams page, right? Logo on the right-hand side, their name, and then the division that they're in, the division that they're in underneath it. I can make custom layouts. So this is relatively new. You got a couple new templates here, or I can make a completely new one from scratch. And imagine what happens when I click from scratch. I get a brand new builder. I can bring a title field over here. And then I can select what field do I want to have be displayed there. Probably the team name. And then I'm going to bring in an image. And I'm going to make this a rounded rectangle. Let's put it on the right-hand side. And I'm going to put player image or team logo. Team logo. And then I want text. Maybe we're going to put something that's italic because that sounds pretty fancy. And I can make it there. And I can put the region that they're in. Or I can put the number of wins they have, and I can add maybe another text to the right of total wins, and I'll say, you know what, I want just kind of a spacer here. I can change the style of things. I can make it italics, or I can make it bolded or not bolded, change the color to something crazy. I can customize this entire thing. So you can imagine how many of these I can shift around and move in whatever type of fashion I want to. It's columns, it's based on different things. You can customize that entire look. This is how you do it. You create your own custom layout. So super handy dandy feature, makes it very easy to look. Okay, so we've got these reports. We were able to look at how these cards are created and changed, and then we can also look at the actions that we can do to interact with them. That's kind of the main thing about reports. Other kinds of reports, I'll just run through real quick for you. List, everybody knows, is the ugly default ones you get by normal. We'll talk about some more list customizations in a session that happens later in the afternoon. And so don't worry about that one. Pivot charts and pivot tables, pretty self-explanatory. A spreadsheet view is pretty interesting because you can make changes to multiple cells of information or multiple fields of information at the same time and then click save once. So it's almost shows the list view, but in spreadsheet format where you can make a bunch of changes, click a save button once, and then everything gets saved all together, so you don't have to do it. One of the risky parts about spreadsheet view is you're losing the scripting actions that happen on actions like on user input, right? So if you're using a form and someone fills out, what state, what country they're from, and they pick the US, and then you want to show a field for state, that on user input script or logic that you have applied doesn't work in a spreadsheet view because everything is just a spreadsheet and you see it all at once. So you're not going to get that. It's better for data manipulation than data entry. If you just need to update a bunch of records with, a different value or easily scan a bunch of records and make changes here and there, that's kind of what the spreadsheet's for. I'd highly recommend against using it on a day-to-day basis as just viewing because that's not really what it's best for. Kanban, I went into detail. Calendar, a timeline is going to show me time bars. So if I have project management tasks, for example, anything with a start time and an end time, I put them on a timeline. And it shows me bars of, resource allocation, essentially. And the last one is a map. You'll have different pins. You can have filters and show different pieces of information. Map view is super cool. It's pretty convenient. Map view works on your phone as well, so you can see different records that are near you or in a certain radius or something along those lines. So those are all the fancy different things about reports. So this is a page. In the page builder itself, we have a couple different components. So the first thing I'll focus on is on the left-hand side, components over here. So the first thing is a panel. This box right here that says India, upcoming events, and then CT in parentheses, that is one single panel. A panel is something that can be designed. It can have a background. It can have a foreground, like this background image of the Taj Mahal and the white or the gray overlay on top of it. It can have text inside of it. And it can have actions happen when you click on certain parts of that panel. And panel is the main thing I'm going to dig into because that's the most customizable. A chart, as you can imagine, can be a bar graph, a pie graph, or a pie chart, a line graph, any kind of charting mechanism for visualizing data. A gauge looks fancy. It's like a speedometer. Everybody knows what a gauge looks like. Kind of helps you track percentage to completion, where you can set a threshold for what our goal is and whether we met that goal or not. Forms and reports, as you can imagine, we can embed different form and report components into a page like this. And I'll worry about the ones at the bottom later once I get to the main ones. So let's take a look at this first panel here, this India panel. I can double click on this panel and I get into the panel builder that we see on the right hand side. And inside this panel builder, I can click on this little arrow over here to add new elements. So just like that card designer was on the quick view builder that I was showing earlier, we have a couple different options, some pre-built options here, right? So I have my text boxes like we saw earlier. And so here I put a text box India on the left-hand side. And let's add another text box on, that was a pretty dashboard, so I really don't want to mess this one up. So here I'm going to maybe take this and I'm going to style it. And so I don't want the column to be aligned. I kind of want it to be maybe in the top right. Just like India's in the top left, this is going to be in the top right. I'm going to keep the background as it is, and action type, if I want to click on this and make the display value. We look at this, and so now in the top right of just that one panel, I added that flat word. And you can see even the image changed because now there's an image locked up there versus one single image in the background, because when I moved that new text box over, it gave a different configuration. So I just have to tweak that a little bit. So to go back and tweaking things, going into this panel builder here again and make a few more changes. 3 main parts on the right-hand side. The style obviously controls how something looks. So if you're clicking on text, style controls things like color, font, size, stuff like that. If you're clicking on an image or a background or a blank space, style controls, the background image and stuff like that. Action happens when you click on it. And you can control a clickable action on any part of this panel. So it's not that I click anywhere in this panel. I can click on upcoming events and it could take me to one place. I could click on India and it could take me to a different place. I can click on the count of upcoming events, the CT, and I can take me to another place. I can click on the blank space, take me to another spot. So every single area of this panel can have its own action. So there's a couple different action types. The most common ones you're probably going to use are things like open URL or opening a page report or a form. You can also execute a function, and this can happen based on maybe a button instead of clicking on a panel. But any type of action you really want, if none of the pre-built ones work for you, executing a function is going to do some level of logic that you want it to do whenever you click on that area. Last thing I'll show you here is going to be behind this, drag and drop builder that you have here for different components, there's a code page. So if I click on the code page, we get a bunch of mess like this, right? And so you don't really need to worry about reading it. That's not really the important part. The important part is if you really need to make some advanced tweaks, there's something called ZML, which is why it says ZML editor up there. And we have some documentation on this. And you can make tweaks to panels and do even more complicated things that you normally wouldn't be able to do just dragging and dropping, but instead using ZML. So very weird example. Let's say I have this value for India, which is, let me just zoom in. Here it says type equals text, value equals India. I'm going to make it India in all caps, and that's literally all I'm going to do. Click save, and you can see it just changed to all caps down here, right? So believe me that changing the code works, and worst case, you can't really mess it up. If you make them screw up, you really just create a new panel and it'll regenerate the code for you. So it's good to play around in here and be able to get a granular level of control. Thank you.